Good evening, everybody. Quick shout out to Dang. Hello, hope you're doing well. Y'all, this is Spencer Keck. I'm coming at you live from Tunnel Hills, Kentucky. And I am the Hillbilly Think Tank. And here in Tunnel Hills, Kentucky, we live for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what makes it all worthwhile, y'all. We got to have our liberty, though, to have all the rest. Of course, you got to have a healthy life too to do it. So, y'all, this has been an interesting week, but an interesting month for this educated hillbilly. No, it's not an oxymoron. Don't call me a moron. You know, I am not someone who has a major in economics, but I did take a college course in it. That's more than most people did. So I understand a little bit about it, and I know how to find actual experts in it. And the experts will tell us the tariffs aren't working. So what are we going to do to push back? Like I've said, my pushback is this month, this is fascism-free February for me. I'm not partaking in anything from Jeff Bezos or Amazon. Now that I know that Bill Gates is in the files till we see exactly what he did or didn't do, I'm not going to use Microsoft either as much as I can possibly help it. Try to wean myself. I'll definitely cut off all Xbox connections since I really never played it. It was just the kids, and I told them no more. Well, listening today to Prof G, who actually came up with this initial concept that I went all in on for against Amazon. The pushback is working. We already know that we've seen it work before when the FCC tried to shut down Jimmy Kimmel and everybody got rid of their Disney Plus accounts and their Hulu accounts. Jonathan, what's up, brother? Glad to see you there. All right, well, I'm going to tell you a story tonight about some other folks in the history of our country, not long after we had become the United States of America. You know, we had the Revolutionary War in 76. That didn't end until the 1780s. Then we finally got our Constitution in line. We tried a different form of government before the constitutional government. That other government didn't work. Finally got a constitutional government. Well, what happened after that is the rest of the story, but involves Kentucky a lot because it involves Appalachia a lot, hillbillies, and folks that lived in this area at that time were also considered hillbillies. So as part of my freedom from buying balderdash from a balding billionaire Bezos, I want to talk about some other folks who tried to push back before and what happened to them. So let's take ourselves back. The Revolutionary War lasted over 8 years. You know, we just ended one of the longest wars in our history, the war in Afghanistan, the 20-year war. But that didn't involve every single American living in the United States. Well, it involved only the 4 to 6% of us who joined the military in the last 20 years, we bore that load. But we know the American Revolution, that affected everybody. So last night when I titled my episode, The New Whiskey Rebellion, I was thinking about the early whiskey rebellion that occurred right after the Revolutionary War. You know, we had President Washington been president for a bit. And veterans, especially these hillbilly veterans that actually won the war, you know, the coastal elites fighting the Revolutionary War, they fought just like the British did. It took the Scots-Irish hillbillies and all the other folks that were living in the hills of all of Appalachia, from Pennsylvania down south. It took them to introduce irregular warfare to the British. That's what won the war. It's the hillbillies hiding behind trees, not lining up in long lines to fire volleys. They were outnumbered by the British, but their irregular warfare won that war. High cost, but we made them pay dearly. So 1794, these poor voluntary soldiers from Appalachia had not been paid what they've been promised. They had supposed to gotten payments for their service, and they were being unpaid for year after year, and they were tired of it. So out here in Appalachia, they started seeing, hey, we've got an excess amount of all kinds of grains, corn, wheat, some others. Let's make some whiskey. We're hardly surviving. We'll sell the whiskey to make ends meet. So that's where your, what I'll call mom and pop, of course it was mostly pop, micro distilleries sprung up. Today we call them moonshine stills, but whiskey stills sprung up from Pennsylvania all the way down Appalachian wilderness, and folks were making their own whiskey, selling it to make ends meet. They were very poor, and this was the western frontier at the time. Well, folks back east decided that, I guess, the folks in Appalachia hadn't paid enough for the war, and they were going to put an excise tax on all the whiskey from western Pennsylvania, where Appalachia is, run all down through the Maryland portion of the foothills of Appalachia, go to what's now West Virginia, Kentucky, North Carolina, Georgia. They did not like this tax at all. They're like, you're making us pay a tax that we can't afford because we can barely afford to sell our whiskey. People can barely afford to buy our whiskey. And now you want to put an excise on it? The excise tax was more than the whiskey cost. So that was hurting the distillers. In Kentucky, they didn't pay it because no one wanted to volunteer to be a tax collector on the whiskey in the Kentucky wilderness. So it went unpaid. Over in Pennsylvania, they were a bit closer to civilization. So folks came in, volunteered to be the whiskey tax collectors, the excise tax collectors. You can imagine that didn't go over well with hillbillies who had just got done fighting a war. Now they felt they weren't being represented by the folks of the coastal elite who were not paying them what they were owed for their 8-year service in the war that gave us this new federal government that now was taxing them for their whiskey in the mountains. So what did they do? Well, they tarred and feathered a lot of these tax collectors, wouldn't pay them, and started to say, hey, no taxation without representation, just like they had heard during the Revolutionary War. Now, Secretary of Treasury, I believe it was, Hamilton, he did not like that, nor did George Washington. They're the ones who came up with this tax on the whiskey. So they said, hey, we are going to go force these guys to do it. At one point in Western Pennsylvania, they had 500 of these veteran hillbilly whiskey makers. Like, no, we're not paying this tax. Not just the whiskey makers, but the folks that were buying it. They're like, we're not paying it. And the folks that were making it, like, we're not going to collect it. You're not going to collect it from us. So long and short of it is, many of them said, hey, your established distilleries, large whiskey distillers in the East Coast, they're not filling this tax at all. You're taxing us to drive us out of business, so folks have to buy your expensive East Coast whiskey. This is the Western frontier, you got to remember at the time. Like, we're not going to do it. Come make us. So they had 500 in Western Pennsylvania who were standing up to the threat of the federal government. All through Appalachia, all the way over here in Kentucky, no one was paying the tax. So Washington and Hamilton raised an army of 13,000 soldiers. This is just as many as Washington had when he kicked the British out of the U.S., or that he used when under his command as a general previously. He now, as president, volunteered to go lead troops against Kentucky hillbillies, Pennsylvania hillbillies, any hillbilly that would stand his way. But they're going to Pennsylvania first because that was the closest to civilization. Now, first off, they asked for volunteers for this army. No one wanted to volunteer, so they forced people to join the military. That was our first big draft of the new government. It was the first draft. So they drafted these 13,000 troops, went in, and put down this, what they called an insurrection. Now, guys, that ended up in some deaths of Appalachian folks, poor folks, veterans who were already pissed off at not being paid for fighting for the freedom of the country. And they also felt they weren't being represented in the government of the coastal elites. Now, why do I mention this? Well, because here we are again. We're looking at a government that we're paying for crap that we don't always need from the big AI companies, from Amazon, from Tim Cook, who went and bowed his knee and went to the Melania movie running after Amazon made it and hosted it in the White House, along with queens and kings and other oligarchs that went to watch it. Yeah, we have got to fight back. But we're outnumbered, just like the hillbillies were. We're outnumbered against the federal troops. So what can we do? Don't give them your money. Now, we know that they're going to collect taxes on us, on our income tax, but don't give them more money outside of your community. Buy local. Don't bow the knee and say, hey, yeah, I'm going to keep on buying Amazon. I'm going to keep on supporting Apple when Tim Cook has bowed his knee to our fascist leader. Got to quit supporting them. Jonathan's correct. Jonathan says buy secondhand. I see Tom says that he saw on social media recently, your papaw didn't run shine in these hills for youngins to be licking boots. And that's absolutely correct. Our great-great-grandfathers didn't make whiskey in Kentucky and fight the feds and their excise tax in order for us now to lick federal boots. If you're a Kentuckian with any heritage from that era, which I am, I know many of us are, you know what we're talking about. So why would we lick the boots now? We didn't do it then. Why will we do it now? Right now, they're also trying to screw up the VA. They're trying to consolidate everything into one place where they can make the decisions of who gets VA payments, who doesn't, who gets their pension, who doesn't, deny care if they want. They're going to try to trash the system so they can privatize it and then really screw us vets. We can't have it. We're back to the Whiskey Rebellion. So they want to now mess with our modern Kentucky bourbon industry. And they have messed it up. Canadians aren't buying our bourbon. It's now illegal to sell it in many Canadian provinces due to this president saying that they must bow a knee to us in Canada and become our 51st state. Or was it 52nd? I can't remember which one was supposed to be the first state first, Greenland or Canada. But we told Canada, if you don't voluntarily do it, we'll bring our troops in. Well, I'm sorry, guys, if you haven't ever spent any time in a wonderful vacation place up north like I have, I spent it in 3 Canadian provinces and territories. Yeah, they're kind, generous, wonderful, hospitable people. But when you treat hospitable, kind people like that and tell them they've got to give you what you own, they don't take it kindly. Just like as if my neighbor comes over to my house tonight with a gun and tells me he's taking my kids, my dogs, and everything I own, and the house for me to get out, or for me to be his slave in the house. I'm not going to do it if he comes back 5 months later and realizes he made a mistake and wants to be best friends again and host steak parties. Yeah, I'm not going to go hang out with him anymore. Why would Canada? They didn't trade with China for years because we told them not to. We told them not to buy their electric vehicles. Now that we put all of this on them, we put tariffs. They're not buying our soy. So all of Kentucky's soy crops rotted. They didn't get sold to Canada or China. But Canada's the one I'm truly worried about, because there was a good trading partner and a good ally when I fought terrorists overseas. They were with us in Afghanistan. Why would we piss in the throat of our allies? Now they're not buying our whiskey, and we've got another whiskey war going on. They've got a whiskey rebellion. They're rebelling against our whiskey. Their Pendleton whiskey and their Crown Royal is not near as good as our Maker's Mark, our Heaven Hill whiskey. Go on down the line of your favorite bourbons. Theirs isn't nearly as good. But they're saying they're going to buy theirs and theirs only after being treated the way we've treated them. An ally in World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Afghanistan. They've been there with us and for us. Korea. So why now would they come back and trade with us? So yeah, everybody's all excited because Friday, Supreme Court said the tariffs were no good. They're going to be gone. Stock market's going to go up. Nope, it didn't. That president said, I'm going to put 10% tax in it. I mean, it is a tax, and it's a rebellion that we're rebelling against that tax. The tax is a tariff. He says it's going to be 10%. Saturday says it's going to be 15%. Today, across the board, it's 10%, and he says he's going to raise it to 15 as soon as he can. Guys, Europe is not buying our whiskey. Or if they do, they say they're going to put a 50% tariff on it, tax on it. They're rebelling against our good Kentucky bourbon, our excellent, the best that there is bourbon, all because we insist on being the world's bullies instead of the world's leader. No one wants to follow a bully. All right, y'all. I know that the orange man's probably about to start obliviating. Don't want to keep anybody from that. Appreciate the comments there, Ding, Tom, and Jonathan. What do y'all think? What are we going to do? We've got to buy local, but we can't allow this president to keep on grifting. And talking about a president grifting. So that president named Washington, George Washington, who led 13,000 troops against Americans in Western Pennsylvania. Guess what he did 2 years after that? He went and started his own whiskey distillery in Mount Vernon, Virginia. Had the largest whiskey distiller in the United States, the most successful, until it burnt down in 1811. But from right after the Whiskey Rebellion till his distillery burnt down, it was the biggest whiskey distillery in America. Could that have been the first political grifter? Tell me what you think in the comments. Renaissance Hillbilly says he has got to go. I agree. But did you all know that George Washington put down a bunch of veteran hillbillies for selling whiskey without a tax, and then had the largest whiskey distillery in the United States and the most successful after that, after he shut down his competition? Interesting. Y'all, here in Kentucky, we know that we must stand together or we'll fall apart together. United we stand, divided we fall. We've got to love our neighbors as ourselves. We are our brother's keeper and our sister's keeper. We got to keep up the fight. I am now 24 days sober from Jeff Bezos's bullshit. I'm not bending my knee to him. This hillbilly and his hillbilly grandparents and great-great-great-grandparents didn't need to bow to a king. I don't fucking need to bow to Jeff Bezos or to any of the sycophants that are licking the boots of our orange dictator. Didn't need it then, don't need it now. I don't think that this guy is going to do what George Washington did and actually lead 13,000 troops out to fight us. But Jeff Bezos sure is doing everything he can to help him grift, just like George Washington did. All right, y'all. Hate to say that about one of my childhood heroes, because we know he never told a lie when he chopped down that cherry tree, right? Bless your corazon. Vote for me for Magistrate District 3. Have a great night.